In regards to the future of Bitcoin, there's two basic points of view that I've noticed. You can classify most people who own Bitcoin or think about Bitcoin in one of these two camps. The first is the stock to flow camp. This was this motto was made famous by Plan B. He's anonymous. We don't know what his real name is, but on Twitter his name's Plan B, and he came out with this stock to flow model, and it's really very good. It's been highly predictive so far, and you can see from the chart the stock to flow model predicts the future price of Bitcoin based on the way that the flow of new Bitcoin coming from the mining rewards is cut in half every 4 years. And this dynamic, this stock to flow ratio, is what makes Bitcoin such great money. And if you understand the dynamics, the economics behind the stock to flow ratio, it's kind of intuitive how the price of Bitcoin can be extrapolated into the future. You can basically extrapolate decades into the future based on this model, and that's what Plan B's stock to flow model has done. And I respect that model. It's very useful. I also happen to think that it is going to break down. I think it's going to break down to the upside. When the stock to flow model breaks forever, I believe that it will be because a hyper-Bitcoinization event has occurred. And this is the second point of view regarding Bitcoin's future. You have the people who really follow the stock to flow model, and then you have those who believe more in a hyper-Bitcoinization. And I am in that second camp. I think that hyper-Bitcoinization is the end game. I think that if and when it occurs, the stock to flow model will simply be irrelevant. It won't matter because it will have been broken forever. And the reason why I believe in hyper-Bitcoinization and why the stock to flow model eventually is going to break is because I believe that the fiat currency system as we know it is eventually going to have this moment where it glitches, where it blue screens, where it can't run anymore. And if this were ever to occur, you would basically have well, my brother had an interesting way of putting this. He called it a rapture moment, where there's this moment where all the wealth from the fiat system is raptured to the Bitcoin system, and that would occur in the event of just a fatal error occurring, a fatal breakdown of the fiat currency system, and that would, in essence, that would be hyper-Bitcoinization, this sort of moment of rapture. And I happen to believe that is how things are going to play out. What we see with the fiat currency system is a system which, the way it operates now, it cannot go on forever like this. And that which cannot go on forever will come to an end. It's unsustainable. And I'll have a video coming out soon on this topic. We see central bankers doubling down, tripling down. They are all in on this system, and they are willing to drive it to its logical conclusion. They are driving this bus straight off the cliff, and not only do they know it, they are pushing the accelerator right down as far as it can go. I think some central bankers, I believe, are true believers. Some people who are tied up in this system, who are the controllers of this fiat currency system, they really are true believers, and they will go down with the ship. And there is another group that I believe they are simply trying to get all the performance out of the system while they still can. It's like a pilot who's in a plane and he's flying on just the gas fumes at this point, but he's still trying to get out just every little bit of performance to allow that plane to glide just a little further. And I think there is a portion of those who are in powers of position, who are controllers, who are technocrats of this fiat currency system, who are well aware of the realities of just how much it's been pushed past its ability to be in any way sustainable, even conceivably sustainable. And they're just trying to squeeze out as much performance as possible before they bail out. And I think either way, the end game is clear. Either way, the end game for the fiat currency system, as we know it, is there's going to be an event. It's all going to come to an end, and I don't know when that is. But the point is that as things operate today, that just cannot go on into the future, and there's no going back. There's no repairing this system. It's going to require a reset. It's going to require a reboot. And I think that's when we get into a scenario where, well, that's when we get into hyperbitcoinization scenarios, or as my brother put it, Bitcoin rapture. So, having said that, I want to examine a scenario that I was thinking about in terms of how this could occur, how hyperbitcoinization in practice could occur. And to preface, I want to go over Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy and the narrative behind what has been happening with him in Bitcoin, and how I don't think that we're talking about the right narrative. So whenever someone brings up MicroStrategy and Bitcoin, the story is always about how Michael Saylor convinced the company, convinced the board and the shareholders for MicroStrategy to go all in on Bitcoin and all that. And Bitcoin is held on MicroStrategy's balance sheet as a reserve asset because he views cash as basically, as he puts it, a melting ice cube. Yeah, he had all this cash on the balance sheet, and he saw what's happening with the Federal Reserve printing money into infinity due to events that have occurred recently. And he just didn't want the cash anymore because he was able to see, like any, even just the average person on the street, there's no excuse that they can't see how this is all going to end. You can't just print into infinity with no consequences. So the story is, MicroStrategy bought Bitcoin, and they're holding it on their balance sheet as a reserve asset. That's not the real story. The real story is that MicroStrategy is using debt and leverage to buy Bitcoin. They're not just putting their cash, their excess cash from their profits into and storing it in Bitcoin so that they don't have to store it in fiat. No. They're not only doing that, but what Michael Saylor has been doing is raising cash by issuing bonds and buying Bitcoin with it. He is using massive amounts of leverage to buy Bitcoin. He is using the fiat currency system against itself to buy Bitcoin. That's the real story. And not only is this a one-time thing, he has been, if you listen to interviews with Michael Saylor, I mean, he's going round after round of bond issuance. He is trying to get as much fiat currency as he can in order to put it all in Bitcoin. And because interest rates that are an all-time low, and because Bitcoin is collateral, he's able to get very great rates. He is able to have very low interest debt to buy Bitcoin, put it on his balance sheet, and then just rinse and repeat. His balance sheet, the equity on the balance sheet of MicroStrategy, 5x's or 10x's or whatever because of Bitcoin's performance. And what does this mean? It means that MicroStrategy can get even more debt because now they have more equity. Now lenders are willing to give them more money. And so you can see with this one company what's going on here. He is using the fiat currency system against itself. He's using low interest rates against the system. And it's this positive feedback loop because the better that this strategy works, the more he's able to borrow. And this brings me to my scenario I was thinking about. I went for a walk today and I was thinking about how this might play out. And here's a potential hyperbitcoinization scenario. So we have, let's just limit this to America alone. How many Americans own homes? It's about 65%. So 65% of Americans own a home, and that means that to the extent that they have equity in their homes, they can easily apply for, or they already have been, they've already qualified for a home equity line of credit. And what is a home equity line of credit? It's just basically a way to borrow cash from the bank at very favorable rates because the line of credit is secured by the equity in the home. So 65% of Americans have this ability to extract cash instantly from their home equity and to do whatever they want with it. Because when you get cash from a home equity line of credit, you just, with a click of a button, you transfer from your line of credit straight to your checking, no questions asked, because it's secured. It's a collateralized loan. It's a collateralized line of credit. The bank doesn't really care because at the end of the day, even if you default, they have your home. So it's not like a credit card, which is unsecured. So what happens if, for whatever reason, Americans, or if you want to extrapolate this to the rest of the world, what happens if people in general lose faith in not just their domestic currency, but in the financial system itself? People will start to look for alternatives. And what if millions of Americans with home equity line of credits start to do exactly what Michael Saylor is doing right now with MicroStrategy? Using debt, using leverage to buy Bitcoin. If we start having significant inflation, if we start to have significant volatility in traditional asset markets, if we start to have hints of a serious financial crisis in which the stability or even the existence of the legacy financial system itself comes into question. If that starts to happen, there's not much of a disincentive for average Americans, average home-owning Americans, to start to throw money into Bitcoin. But not only that, but to use their line of credits to do exactly what Michael Saylor is doing right now.